Well, welcome everyone. It's nice to see so many of you here. We just heard from Jen that we had 380 people register for this. Um, really excited to be speaking with George and Don today about this book. And believe me, to have this in my hands, I've been looking forward to this moment. When it arrived, day after it came out, I was very happy to have it in my hands at last. Um, So we're together for the next hour and a half, and there's a bunch of things that I'd love to hear from George and Don about in the process of this book and what they'd love you to get from our time together today and what you'll get from reading it. And there'll be an opportunity later on as we sit here together as for you to ask your questions. So we'll come on to that a little later. But the first question I have, and it's always intrigued me this, it's a novel. Now, I'd love to know from the two of you why you decided to make it a novel as opposed to, I don't know, a case study of your working lives together.
G, you want me to handle that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, well, it didn't really start out as that. Initially, when we started working together on it, we thought it might end up as a primer on a nonfiction primer on how to bring the three principles or state of mind into a business or a large organization. And so we spent a lot of time kind of outlining that and fleshing that out. And George, who is the master of the metaphor and a wonderful storyteller, we would always take the different concepts we were trying to convey and then wrap it in a little vignette. And we'd make up some characters and we'd show how it works in real life. And so we would have a concept, an explanation of the concept, and a little vignette to show how it works. And as we were pinning those all together, I don't know if we got tired of making up different vignettes, or we just thought that it was being too redundant, and we just had this idea to why don't we just make up one big story? And so we decided to, instead of making up little vignettes and little stories to illustrate the points, we would just make up one big story. And then once we decided to do that, it was really fun. It was really fun to do. So we had a great time. Is that your memory of it, George?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So that's how it ended up being a novel. You know, I always wanted to play shortstop for the Red Sox or be a CEO of a publicly traded company or something, but I never thought that George Pransky and I would be novelists. It's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah. Go figure.
Go figure. Exactly.
I'd like to go back to the very beginning then, and if you could remember the inspiration for the two of you collaborating to begin with on what it then turned out to be this book and how it all began.
Mhm. Well, if you go back to 2009 or so, was a kind of a tumultuous time for everybody. I mean, my mom was at the end of having a long, difficult illness, and I was leaving my business for a whole host of reasons and retiring, and Sid Banks passed away in that same time frame, and we were all, those of us in the three principles world, we're all worried about what would happen after Sid's passing. Um, you know, would the message continue to flow out? Would it get compromised? And 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 so we all decided to get together and have a memorial service for Sid, and then also what's next? What's next for the three principles world the uh, now that Sid has passed away? And we all met in Vermont, and we had a great time there. And George and I got a chance to and from that came the Three Principles Global Community. Actually, that we kind of formed it there, and George and I were on the board to begin with, and for 3PGC, and so we were continuing to work together. Now we would work together in the business, and we worked together on 3PGC, and then we worked together with different clients, and we were spending a lot of time together, and it was terrific. And one day George said, we ought to write a book. We were sitting somewhere talking and really getting into it and having a great time. And George said, we ought to write a book. And I said, yeah, we ought to write a book. And he said, no, I'm serious. We ought to write a book together. We ought to write a book about our experiences with business and your business and other businesses, and how critical it is to bring the three principles, or state of mind, as we call it, into a business, and be able to show people that it's really the horsepower that drives everything, that drives creativity and productivity and collaboration and camaraderie. And it would be a wonderful book, he said, and the world needs to know about this. And I said, well, that's a good idea. We should do it. He says, today is the day that we start writing a book. And that was the day we started writing a book. And if it just didn't come to him in a conversation, and if he didn't have the resilience and persistence to keep it going, then we wouldn't have gotten here. And it's been a long journey, but it just was an idea that he had. We went down a couple of dead end roads, and then we ultimately decided it was going to be a novel, and we were going to do it. And despite all kinds of things that the world conspired to make it not happen, now it's happened. So if you live long enough, anything can happen, is the moral of the story.
George, what do you remember of those early moments when you were so inspired to say, hey, let's write a book?
Well, to me, the message had to go out. The state of mind message, to me, was the key. So we explored state of mind and the implications of it, and that's the key point that we had, was the state of mind is the important message that we want to put out in the world.
That's right.
Because at the time, there were all kinds of messages, all different. There were hundreds of messages, but we thought that state of mind was the ultimate message that we wanted to teach people. And that's where we were coming from. And everything we said was consistent with that.
Yeah, one thing that George always that used to get under his skin was that there would be a flavor of the month. And even in the storytelling parable mode, you see these small business books that tell a story, and they have a message that they're trying to convey to business people to help their plight, and people would see state of mind as just one of many,
Right.
Another arrow in the quiver. And so we have bounce, and we have this, and we have that, and we have the 1 minute manager, and we all the different parables that were out there, and George was always uncompromising in his position that state of mind drives everything. It's the horsepower that drives everything. And so we when we started out, we actually we spent a lot of time on saying, okay, what are the core things that we want to make sure we get across in this book? And we spent a lot of time honing about six major teachings, concepts, lessons that we wanted to make sure that we, if nothing else, we got these six across. And then over time, we would have conversations, and we'd say, "Oh, that's good. We should make sure we get that in the book." And oh, that's nice. We should get that. So we had six major messages that really didn't change much, and then we had somewhere around 20 we called corollary messages that we wanted to make sure got in, and 20 grew to quite a bit. And I'll give my my buddy Wyn a little shout out. At the end, it was a very long list, and it was pretty much cryptic, but it was a long list. And Wyn said to me, "I will take 2 weeks off of my business and sit with you and work with you to get this book over the finish line," because we were that close at that time. And I said, "Well," he said, "what needs to be done, do you think?" I said, "Well, I need to sanity check these 272 things that I've been keeping and make sure that they found their way into the book." And he took that document and he made what I think you'd call is it called a concordance? A reference. And he went through every one of those things and said where it was in the book. And then we could look at it and see if it was faithfully implemented. And that was kind of that task there that I was too close to it to do, and George was too close to it to do. He volunteered out of nowhere to put a set of eyes on it, and it got it over the goal line. But when we started with all those concepts and ideas and things that we wanted to get through, we kind of put it in a primer, as I said. And when I walk into Barnes and Noble and I'd see all these business books, I'd say, what's going to be different about this? And I'll tell you one really quick story from aerospace and defense is that now it's old hat, but back in the day, they were bringing what was called lean thinking and lean manufacturing into the factories. And you had to get in line with all the lean manufacturing techniques. And there were books upon books upon books about what they were trying to get us to adopt and to implement in the companies. And I was with the head of Lockheed Aerospace one day, and I said, my guys bring me all these books. This is like so many books. I don't have time to read all those books. And he reached on his shelf and he handed me a book called The Goal. A guy named Goldratt wrote a book called The Goal. It's on the theory of constraints. And he said, just read this. You'll be fine. Just read this. And I read it on the airplane home. It was a novel. And I finished reading that novel and I thought, wow, I really understand this thing. And so I always thought that the goal would be, and then we took it as a sign that one day I was telling George about the goal, like we could make this a novel. And he said, what is it called? I said, The Goal. He said, I just had a client who said his favorite book was The Goal. And I said, well, there's a sign for you. And so we kind of at least the idea of conveying messages through a novel was one that we kind of patterned after the goals approach.
So I'd like to go a little further back than when the inspiration started for this book back in 2009 then. You two meeting for the first time. Do you remember when that was? Because I'm pretty sure I heard about it on one kitchen table or another somewhere over the last 4 or 5 years. But I can't quite remember the detail, but I think other people would love to hear that.
What do you think, G? You want to take that or you want me to?
No, you do it.
Okay. Well, I there was a wonderful guy in the company that I was working in when I was a young man, who was a training and development guy. His name was Dick Bezoin, and he was a terrific, terrific guy. Is a terrific, terrific guy. And so Dick, to make a very long story short, Dick stumbled on some writings by George Pransky and one of his colleagues, and was so affected by it that he, in the days before it was easy to stalk people, he started stalking George Pransky, and he tracked him down and he connected with him and got George to send him some cassette tapes. And Dick would lend the cassette tapes out, and I came across George's cassette tapes through my HR person who was working in the training world, and she said, "Oh, you might like these. You'll like these." And so I would listen to them. It's good for insomnia, and I would listen to them, and I thought they were so great, but I couldn't keep them forever, and I gave them back. But I always remembered it. And then when I got in trouble, when I got a new assignment, and it was a big mess assignment, similar to Aiden's in the book, it was I was in over my head, and so I called Dick Bezoin and I said, "Hey, remember those tapes you had? Can I borrow those tapes?" He says, "I can do you better than that. Pransky's coming to New Hampshire, where we were." I said, "When's that?" He said, "Oh, he's coming in about a month or so." And I said, "Well, can you set me up for a lunch with him?" And he said, "Yeah, for sure." So George and I had lunch at the Sheraton Terra in South Nashua, New Hampshire, and then and then and we finished lunch, and George said, "Well, let's go back to your office and chat some more." I'm like, I have some work to do, and he said, "Oh, that's okay. We can go have a chat." And so we talked for a while, and one thing led to another, and there were a couple of other guys that Dick had subjected to the State of Mind stuff, and they were interested, and so that was back in 1997, and so I hired George at that point, and then George brought, I mean, the Hall of Fame list of State of Mind practitioners over the years, and before we knew it, it was all over a very, very large corporation, and and it was pushed down from my level. I was what you would call a vice president, general manager at that point. But then when we had some leadership changes, we pushed it up, and then got it more broadly applied to the rest of the corporation. It was quite a time, and we had lots of the best in there, and it was a very heady time. And the one takeaway that I always think of is that whenever I was asked to justify the investment and the return on investment, it was very easy, almost a perfect correlation for me to show that the more we immerse the workforce in the state of mind, and we called it state of mind in business success, the more we immerse the people in the state of mind program, the better the metrics were. So every metric would correlate almost perfectly with the immersion of the workforce in the things that we were teaching. So all of a sudden, customer surveys got better, and on-time deliveries got better, and first-time yields got better, and all the things, and of course profit, sales, profit, cash, all those metrics got better. And so after a while, it was hard. Even the most cynical and skeptical among us would have to say this. They can only say correlation doesn't equal causation for so long, and then it kind of strangles you, and you say, "Wow, there must be something here."
See, from my point of view, I was interested. Let me see how to say this. I was interested. Well, let me say it my own way. At one point, Dick Bezoin said, "I want you guys to listen to a George Pransky talk, I want to be silent and listen. And what we heard was uh, what we heard was let me see. I talked. They would say I talked very slow, and that really stood out to them. And they thought to themselves, "How come he talks so slow?" And I and uh, uh, Dick Bezoin said, "Well, he's being reflective, and that's why he talks so slow, because he reflects on what he wants to say." And somehow they picked that up as an important thing. Is talking slow became became a big deal.
Yeah, it was quite foreign to them.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an important point because often we see the behavior, such as somebody talking slow, and think that the talking slow is where it's at, as opposed to no, that's a symptom of being in a reflective state of mind, and that's where it's at.
Yeah.
And to me, with all of these other books that you, Don, that you mentioned, you go into Barnes and Noble and you'd see the new flavor of the month, and it was always about the superficial, as
Right.
opposed to what you've nailed in this book, which is what's behind the brilliance that gets shown in behavior. What is the cause behind the symptomatic
Yeah.
changes in people?
Right. Exactly right. And when you go through the book, I mean, we should say that it is loosely based. It is loosely based on our experience in my company, but also other companies that George and I have worked with, or George has worked with Pransky and Associates, and so all of the characters, uh, they're inspired by somebody perhaps, but they're composites. They're all composites, and there isn't, all a lot of my former colleagues are now trying to guess who's who and whatnot. They're all kind of they're all composite characters, and we it's the beauty of writing fiction that you can make them better than they were or worse than they were, or and but there are some very uh, real things in that book. And one of them, a person that George and I will have him remain nameless, but was meeting with George and said, and we were trying to make sure that this more senior person was okay with us continuing with what we were doing. And he said, "I don't care if you can explain to me why so many brilliant people do so many dumb things." And George says, "Well, it turns out that's my specialty to fix that." And that's a line in the book, and it's one that was as many others were, but um, the brilliant people went without question, but the mistakes that were being made, was because people were frenzied, and they didn't they were um,
They'd lost their bearings.
they lost their bearings. They were moving too quickly. They were not thinking clearly. They were not being reflective, and all those things, just like we have in the book. And there's a lot of earmarks of victimization and blame and fractured leadership, and a lot of things that were very real, that we try to bring forward in the book. And one of the things that George and I really wanted to do, and I've gotten some feedback that says some people see it, is that we wanted to lay out, you know, the concepts and the ideas behind state of mind and the three principles, and then have characters in the book come up with as cynical, skeptical, and non-believing arguments against it as they possibly could, and then rise above it, because that's what we faced a lot. People, it's very easy to think it's Pollyannish and too good to be true, and some sort of magic that you sit around with George Pransky and everything, all your problems go away. All the cynical comments that we got. We wanted to have our characters in the book bringing those things, because it's only human nature, and I would say the vast majority of people have that reaction out of the gate. And watching over the years and learning from George about how to not react or overreact to those kind of reactions, but just take them in and have good calm discussions about it. And before you know it, I mean, we over the years we won over some very, very tough customers, and then before you know it, and a lot of people who MIT PhDs and the best engineers in the world, people who live in a very corporeal world would be having discussions with George or Sid Banks or somebody about the craziest things, and that's kind of the way it works almost everywhere we work with people.
Well, here's what intrigues me as well in this, because when I picked up the manuscript, as you said, it was not far off done. It just needed the final few edits. But I want to know what it's like writing with a writing partner who's on the other side of the continent. So Don in New England, George in Washington State. How did it work, you two writing 3,000 miles apart?
Yeah, that's a great question. We talked a lot on the phone, and we met in person. I mean, we met places, Vermont several times, and Washington, and if George was out here, we were working for some period of time. We were working with Raytheon, and so we were in California together. We were in Texas together. We were in Massachusetts together, and we'd always try to carve out some time to talk about it, talk about the book, and what would happen is, we'd have conversations mostly about state of mind ideas, but also plot. And George, he's not a big novel reader, but he's a big movie guy and a big TV show, Breaking Bad guy. I mean, he's always telling me the different shows to watch, and the next one that isn't great will be the first. And so he's got a real sense of story arc and scenes and twists, plot twists, and things like that. So we just talk about it, and then mostly I would go back and write, and then once I had something that was suitable for reading and critiquing, I'd send it out, and he'd read it, and he'd say, I don't really like this, or I really like that, or where'd that come from, or whatever. And so it was not an efficient process, but it was a fabulous process. It was, I mean, I would often say, not to George because he'd get mad, but I would often say, I mean, I'd like to see if we can finish this book because we started it, but I don't really care if it ever gets published, because, I mean, selfishly, I mean, just the experience of going through it and the fun of going through it was unbelievable. It was really, really, really great. We had a really good time together, and it gave us an excuse to spend a lot of time together and to talk sports and have fun, And but anytime I'd say, well, we'll see if it comes out, he'd say, no, it's got to come out. And so that was a driving force.
Yeah.
He can be persistent about such things. So we but it was not an efficient process. And so in the end, this book is, I think, 145,000 words, and it was targeted to be 130,000 because that's like a commercial novel, about a 125, 130 commercial novel, and it's more than that. And because I just couldn't do it I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't edit anymore. And there's probably 325,000 words written for it. I mean, as inefficient as you could possibly be. And they say Faulkner gets credit for this horrible saying. Stephen, the horror guy from Vermont there, Stephen, not remembering his last name, but everybody knows who I'm talking about. He uses it as well. It was actually it first started, but it says King. Thank you, Stephen King. And there's a saying about editing is that you have to be ready. This is a terrible thing, but you have to be ready to kill your darlings. And the first time I heard that, I said, "Oh, that's horrible," But that's what it is, and it is so hard. I mean, to me, writing is easy. I mean, I never wrote anything but contracts or letters or thing. I never wrote anything other than business writing. But when we got into it, I found business writing is easy. Editing is brutal. Editing is brutal. And so George and I got very committed to a story arc, and things that didn't fit in the arc, but were some of the best things I thought we did. Unquestionably, I think some of the best stuff we did had to end up on the floor, on the editing floor, because it didn't fit the arc. And George said this a couple times, maybe we should do 2 books. I'm like, no. We're not doing 2 books. We have to do 1 book. And he'd say, well, then we have to stick to this. He'd say, that's our story arc, and we're sticking to it. And we'd have to stay within the arc, and we did. But there's some things like we did some stuff with veterans, because I mean when we were working together, we were on war footing. The country was on war footing for the entire time, literally the entire time. And we went through a lot, and we had a lot of reservists that went overseas. They weren't even supposed to be deployed. Okay, well, you're going to do one turn, and then all of a sudden they do 6 or 7. And they had real issues. And we had some chapters in the book around Jacob Bump working with returning veterans who were struggling, and discussions around the 3 principles and around state of mind and how it could help returning veterans with PTSD. And I thought that was some of the best stuff in the whole book, but it was a little bit too much of a detour from the story arc. And so it's out there. My friend Christy the other day said, never think that the stuff that's on the edit that's on the cutting room floor doesn't have a life somewhere, some way. And so maybe it will see the light of day sometime. But there was some compelling stuff in real life, and it was some compelling stuff in the book project.
Well, George, we've heard Don's side of the story of him working with you. George, what's your side of the story of working with Don?
Uh-oh.
Oh, well, I loved working with him. And I he really, it looked to me like he really knew what he was doing, even though I didn't understand what he was doing so well. But he he's, he understood it, and that's what that's what mattered. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm to me the state of mind issue uh, is the most important thing in my life. Is the state of mind. To me, that's most important. Whatever state of mind I have uh, on a go forward basis, that's what matters to me. So I, uh, let me say it differently. Uh, when we would write together, I would be asking myself, does this speak to the state of mind issue? And if it didn't speak to that issue, I wasn't having it. So I was very particular in how I spent my time. So I mentioned earlier about people, how slow I talked. And people pick that up. And when they talk slower, they became more reflective. So in a way, there was a method to my madness. And I thought Don was a brilliant partner because he uh, he understood this state of mind issue, and he spoke to it, and did a great job uh, speaking to it. So for me, it was a very simple process. All I had to do was uh, stick to the state of mind issue, and I was on solid ground. Now I know that out in the world, everybody has their own issue, things that matter to them, and they're important to them. But that's what we uh, ultimately said, of all the things that matter in a human experience, state of mind is on the top of the list. So that was really where we're coming from, and everything that was outside of that, we weren't interested in.
One might even say it's the bottom line, George.
Yeah, yeah, you might say it. You might say it.
I'd love you to share the story of how you ended up with that as the book title.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, so we had working titles along the way. We had various working titles, and we didn't like any of them, but we had to call it something. And we had when I would print it out at Staples, I had to call it something. So I'd call it. We had all these different things, and so I was actually in this house. I'm away on vacation on the New Hampshire seacoast, and I was actually in this house a couple of years ago. And my daughter had a bunch of friends over, and and we were talking about the title that we were working with at that point. And they're like, we don't like that. I don't really get it. I don't like that. I say, it's just a working title, you know. And so one of my daughter's friends was on her phone and she was Googling me and she was looking at different things. And she had seen some podcasts that I had done. And I I may have this wrong, but I think it might have been Barb Patterson, one I did with Barb Patterson. And Barb called it State of Mind and the Bottom Line. And my daughter's friend said, well, that's what you should call the book. And then another friend of hers said, no, you should say State of Mind is the bottom line. And I said, there you go.
Wow.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And that was it. And so that became the working title, and it stuck.
Yeah.
You remember that one?
I do, because I didn't like the other ones either. And when I heard this one, I went, yes.
That's it. Yeah.
You did not like the other ones. That's right.
No, no, nailed it. It's just another example to me of how creativity works, literally out of the blue. It's another example of mind at play, of how ideas can come from the formless into form and then into a printed book. I love hearing how that happens. And in the same way as so many of the stories that you're sharing today is from the same ilk, just seeing how mind really works. There's a question that I had for the uninitiated. When the two of you say state of mind, what do you mean in layman's terms?
Go ahead, G.
Well, I think it's a, that's a that's a good question. Uh, I don't know. I don't know how to. I don't know how to answer it. Uh, I don't. I just don't have a. I'm embarrassed. I don't. I,
It's
I feel, so one way you you could answer it is it's a feeling state. It's a feeling state, and depending how deep your feeling is, it's gonna ex, ex, uh, it's a feeling state. I don't know. I don't know what else there is to say it. How else to say it?
to me, if you think of it from the books perspective, it's where people's level of psychological fitness, or where they're coming from,
Right.
where they're coming from in their thinking about the world. I mean, if you believe what Sid Banks would say is that we are literally creating our experience of life through our thinking, then your thinking or your state of mind matters. Because if you're coming from a position of, the world's out to get me and I'm a victim of this and a victim of that, or, then that's the world you're going to see. And if you're coming from a position of, uh, of abundance and of that people are meant to work together and people are meant, to looking at things and seeing the world, and coming from a position of health and optimism, and then that's the world you're going to see, because we're creating our moment to moment experience through the way we're thinking. So state of mind is that it's where you're coming from. And we try to point out that, people's psychological fitness matters as just like one's physical fitness matters. And understanding the principles of mind, consciousness, and thought gives you a psychological foundation. And this we take ourselves in the direction of humans having a spiritual experience in this world. We don't go too far down that path, but having a strong psychological foundation gives people resilience and the ability to not take themselves too seriously, the ability to take things in stride, and not overreact, and notice where you're coming from and what your state of mind is. And so what in the book where when Aiden takes over his new organization, it's the state of mind of the people in it is one of we have too much to do. The deck is stacked against us. The customers are against us. No camaraderie, blame, finger pointing, all those things are the state of mind from which the people are entering their day-to-day life in the workplace. And not surprisingly, you end up with frenzied finger pointing environment in a very poor environment, work environment, and a bad culture. Ultimately, your culture is the aggregate state of mind of all the people in it. Does that answer your question, Wyn?
Yeah. Well, it does to me, but then again, I mean, I've been in this world for a while with both of you. Um, Here's my kind of my wish though. If you're not clear yet on what state of mind is, there's a really good book that's just out. And when you read this, you'll really understand all the different ways of describing state of mind and the real life implications of what that can actually do as the leverage point.
I love uh, I love the idea of psychological fitness. I think that's a great term.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people's levels of psychological fitness. The higher the level, the better.
And hopefully, the arc of the story is people go from a very poor state of mind, which impacts the health of the business and the performance of the business and their personal lives and everything that goes along with it. And as they learn more about the three principles and about state of mind, you see that their state of mind improves and their psychological fitness grows and they get stronger psychologically, and just like if you're trying to compete in a sport, the better your physical fitness is, the better and the more likely you'll perform well in your chosen sport. if you're psychologically fit and you're psychologically strong, then the more resilient you'll be, and the better you handle all of life in business in this case, but also life throws at you, and you handle it better and you operate. Now, the one thing that we always we always faced was, this the whole critique of this is soft stuff. It's touchy feely, soft, psychological stuff. But we're a business. We're all about results, which is why we called the program in our business State of Mind and Business Success, because without the second part, you're not going to get too many people interested in the first part from a strictly business standpoint. And hopefully we show that evolution in the book, and show how the return on investment is well beyond it. You can calculate it in many respects, as I said earlier, but it's well beyond the calculation point, to the point where things happen that really shouldn't happen, or it doesn't seem like it should happen.
Well, one thing that I wanted to point out to is there are, let me see how to say it. Let me just get my bearings here.
Take your time.
People who either read the book are going to be impressed, in my mind, by how much the book says about people's private lives. So if you read the book, it will have great implications about how you live your private life. So people who read the book, for example, have more fun in their private lives, and they're enjoying themselves more. They're yeah, I don't know what else to say, but that's I did want to say that.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great point, George. I mean, we're all whole humans after all,
Yeah,
and you can only compartmentalize so much, and everything spills over into everything else. I mean, I've said many times, if I had $1 for every time someone that I've worked with, or that was in my business or whatever, says, geez, I really feel different. It's really affecting my life, and but I feel a little guilty because I think it's helping me work wise, but where it's really helping me is in my marriage, or
right, exactly.
with my kids, or with my family, or in my community, or in my outside life. I feel like, and but all the people around them in the workplace would see dramatic changes in them, and I'd say, well, that's okay. The personal side's on us. You get the benefit, and it's on us.
Yeah,
Because you really, if you're miserable in your personal life, only the very a very, very small number of people can not let it seep into their professional life in some way. It's just, so we're complex, but we're integrated.
yeah,
We're integrated people, and the rising tide lifts all boats when it comes to state of mind. As you elevate your state of mind and your psychological fitness as we were talking about. As you elevate that, it can't help but impact your life and in all the different aspects of it. And we do show that. And in the book, we also show that there were some people in the professional world who think that, this is getting a little too personal. The State of Mind program was getting too personal, and they didn't like that, and they thought it was encroaching on. There's even a scene in the book where they that one of the senior people thinks that it puts us at legal risk because we're meddling in people's lives too much, and they were misunderstanding things in that moment of the book. But these are the kind of things that do come up, and we tried to find all the things that anyone would say negatively about such a program and wash them out in a way that people will accept. It was a tricky book because we violated one of the cardinal rules in that we didn't really get very precise about our target audience. We did not, and I was worried about that because there's a lot of business stuff in there. It has to be credible and authentic to a seasoned, grizzled business person, but it has to be accessible to someone who doesn't know anything about business. And so you got to find that balance, and so far, I mean, the book's barely come out, but so far the feedback is interesting that the business people think that it rings true. It rings true in the environment, and the non-business people say, I don't understand all the business stuff, but I get the gist enough, and it moves well. And I'm interested in the psychological and spiritual stuff. That's what I want to get to, and I know I'm going to get there. But I'm learning about the business. I'm kind of curious about it. I mean, we seem to have struck the balance, but we'll see. We'll see. It's a very niche business we're writing about too, that some people may not resonate, but we'll see. I'm sorry, Wyn.
Well, I think you've done a great job yeah, you could say that the nature of the business that you were writing about would be niche, but you write it in a very accessible way that it could be about anything, because I've never operated in that world. My background's in consumer goods. I understood it. I mean, the principles are exactly the same in the business world of form, yet alone the principles of state of mind. There's something that you both said that I'd love to explore. When you talked about state of mind and then psychological fitness, at the beginning of the book, the lead character, who may be based upon one of you, Don, I don't know, Aiden, then he would have said at the beginning that he was psychologically fit. And then what I love in the early story arc of it, before Aiden meets Jacob Bump, he finds out that he's not. And then he realizes there's something else there to see. And there's such a, I don't know, it surprised me, his humility.
Yeah.
In meeting Bump, that he became really open to it when there were so many things in his mind in reading the narration from that to say, this is crazy and I'm doing it. And I don't know if there was something in there that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I don't, we didn't talk about spoilers, so I don't want to, I don't know how many people have read it or not read it or whatever, but I understand what you're asking. And what we were trying to show there was that, Aiden comes from a sports background, a brute force background, a driving, you just keep pounding till you get the results you need background. And to him, he interpreted that as being resilient and mentally strong. Like you've seen a lot of programs around mental toughness, and so he so that's the kind of, if you asked Aiden, he would say, "I'm mentally tough. I'm psychologically fit, and you know, I'm going to get the results or die trying." Sort of mentality, which he thought, and a lot of people think, it is what mental toughness or psychological fitness is. But when he meets Jacob Boardman Bump III, uh, he when he meets him, he realizes that is an inch deep. That's really, that's kind of it might be a solid layer, but it's not a deep layer, and so he can't really, when he's initially meeting with Bump, he can't put his finger on what this guy's got that he doesn't, but he knows it has something to do with depth, and as much as he would like to send the guy packing, he just can't quite get himself to do it. And so, to the surprise of people around him, and that is that what you were getting at?
Yeah, it was. Now, the good news is because it's in the first quarter of the book,
Yeah.
it's not much of a spoiler. So
Well,
I
I
think it's
think
worthwhile saying.
I think if you read the Amazon summary, you could probably predict that little bit. So I don't think there was much of a spoiler there. But that's sort of
Yeah.
the explanation of it. And I think a lot of people who George has worked with, and other practitioners, and yourself, Wyn, I mean, a lot of people at first blush say, "I don't need this," you know, and it's tough to argue sometimes, because you look at, just like Aiden. Um, I think we have him at like 43 years old or something, and he's got a successful track record. I mean, they just promoted him like two levels above the next rung that he's supposed to take on the ladder, because he's such a high potential performer. And I mean, we've all known people who, by the world's terms, and by the tail of the tape, as they say, or the resume, you'd say they're extraordinarily successful. And it's tough. We found this with a lot of the engineers things. I mean, these guys are doctors in physics from MIT, and they've got 3 master's degrees below, and they think they're 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and they have good reason to think that. And so a lot of them at first blush say, "I don't need this. I mean, I don't need this. I mean, look how successful I am," but then they listen to a little more, and a little more, and a little more, and they find out that there's a depth to what we're
Yeah.
talking about, that can um, raise your ceiling, raise the ceiling, beyond anything that the standard credentials would suggest.
Well, on that point, Don, I think what really matters, there's a lot of people here on this call right now who I know. And some of them I know really well, and some of them I know a little bit. And a lot of them, and I put myself in this same category too, is that we're often faced with the same attitude of the people that you just raised. That they are, there's nothing in this for me. I don't need this. I'm doing great. And I think this is a wonderful lesson in how to not be discouraged when people don't hear it the first time, to persevere. Because I think it really matters. Because if I had listened to every detractor I faced over the last 15 years, there's no way I'd be having this conversation right now. There's no
Yeah.
way I'd be up to the things that I do in my work these days, and personally. So I think it really matters that people take that lesson from what you've just shared, because there's a heap of those in this book.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, one term that I like, I don't know where we came up with it, but we came up with it somewhere along the line, is discouragement proof.
Yeah.
And to be, I mean, I watched George Pransky work. I watched Sid Banks work. I've watched you win and so many others. And when we talk about state of mind, one way to describe it is discouragement proof. And it's amazing to me, when George would work with the worst naysayers of them all. And I mean, sometimes really in public, really pushing back and just like characters in the book do. And to watch George just let it roll right off his back and I'd say, geez, I'm really sorry about so and so's behavior in there. He'd say, what? Oh, that's nothing. I'm not worried about that. And sooner or later, there's one person in particular that I certainly wouldn't name, but the worst naysayer of all. Then a couple of years later, George and I found out was the strongest guy on State of Mind. And when we left him,
Yeah.
we thought he'll never come around. But he came around. It took him a long time. Came around, and George was nothing if not persistent and in that, and just discouragement proof. Just wouldn't, oh, he'll come around. He just say he'll come around, and that's the way Jacob Bump is as well.
Yeah.
He's not worried about people who don't line up the first time or the 10th time, don't understand things the 15th time. Just got to find a different way. Everybody has different ways of hearing things and learning things and being affected by things, and you just look for it.
Well, I asked you the question of a reminding of how the book got its title, which I do know, but I don't know how you two decided that this other character was going to be called Jacob Boardman Bump the Third. I don't know if there's a story there, but every time I think about it, I giggle in the way, George, you are now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You want,
we
you
had
want
a great a terrific laugh when we came up with that idea. Jacob Boardman Bump the
my
third.
my recollection, George, is that you knew a guy named Jacob Bump once way back
Yeah,
day, and I think uh, we just I think we might have inserted Boardman, and so his name was Jacob Boardman Bump, and he sounded like he might be a third, so we added
yeah,
two. And it's pretty funny. Some people just did not like that name in the early going, and now and they warmed up to it.
yeah.
From Lower Slaughter, Wyn. He's from Lower Slaughter.
Yeah.
Well, and where I live in Berkshire in the UK, there's a lot of villages that sound a bit like Lower Slaughter. There's Little
Yeah.
Plattlebury, and there's all those kind of things, and West Armpit, and all those kind of things. So, yeah, Lower Slaughter sounds very feasible to me. Hey, so I'd like it. I'd like us to open it up to the people that we've got here. I think probably the best thing to do because of with sound with many people, if you could type in your question to George and Don, then please type that in and I'll read a bunch of them out in the time that we have. But there's one question I have before I open it up and read a selection of those questions would be, what's the one hope that each of you have for this book now it's out in the world?
Go ahead, G.
Well, uh, I'm hoping that it has the power to help people. That's the only thing I'm concerned about.
Well, I second that. I used to talk to Sid Banks, and I would say, what's your if you think purpose is everything, what's your purpose? He says, oh, that's easy for me. I want to relieve human suffering. I want to do my part to relieve human suffering. And I'd say, I don't know, Sid. I mean, the people I'm around, they seem, reasonably happy. They don't seem like they're suffering. I mean, they seem like they're all doing okay. What I'm looking to do is help them to see how to raise their game to higher and higher levels, because I think they're in pretty good shape. And I just want them to see their human potential and see, through teaching them the state of mind, the state of mind precepts that we could get them to be more resilient and see their potential and take their game to higher levels. And Sid would say, well, okay, you go ahead and do that. I'm gonna help relieve human suffering. And I've always thought about that. And as I've gotten older, I see how where my goal was okay, it was somewhat necessary but insufficient, and Sid's goal was the right goal. And
Yeah.
so if I were to, when George says help people, I would say help people see that their human suffering, their suffering is a prison sentence of their own making, and that what Sid brought forward and what we're trying to do our part with will help them see that that the dirty little secret is we're doing it to ourselves, and that the more people realize that, the more they see, and the more and the more their suffering will be relieved. And I do think that to some degree, everybody's suffering. All human beings are suffering. And if we can do our little part, then that would be a good outcome for the book, to help people see that.
Right. Thank you. So, got a couple of questions, and as I get ready for that, just a quick plug on this. I think we've got actually on by the power of the phone that the gentleman who was the voiceover artist who did the audiobook, Bert, is with us.
Thank
Now,
you, Wyn.
because I'd read it a number of times, um, and now in the printed final version, I've read it. I've taken so far the first 6 hours of audiobook out of the 15 that's there. And Bert, you done a really good job. I love it. So if you're an audiobook person, it's awesome. It's available electronically, and of course, you've seen it in the old-fashioned way of being in print. So it is available everywhere. So I wanted to say that. By the way, when it first came out and I posted on LinkedIn what I actually thought of the book, there was a bunch of people that commented to saying, "Are you on commission or something?"
Yeah,
Um,
I saw that. Yeah.
no, the wish is the same wish as the George and Don, what you just said, because I know how much unnecessary suffering happens in the workplace, as well as, people taking that workplace stress back at home too, and what that can do to when that
Mhm.
alleviates in them and they have a totally different life at home. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm going to go to a couple of questions here. So,
But I
Brandy,
just want
hi,
to say,
Brandy.
Wyn, if I could just say one thing, that thank you for the shout out to Bert. Bert lived through our whole state of mind and business success program in our company. He's a brilliant engineer, kind of a tortured engineer, as he's an Ivy League English guy and a musician and an actor and a singer, but he's intimate with all of this and understands it as well as anybody. And when the time came, everyone always says, read, you should read your own book for audiobook, but I was never going to do that. And Bert he's just got great pipes. And we went to a little place in upstate Washington that George has used to do his audiobooks in a beautiful studio named, run by Ramblin' Bob. And Ramblin' Bob worked with us for over a week and came off. I mean, Bert had never done this before. We came out of that week, and Ramblin' Bob said, "You should get yourself an agent." and he meant it. And it was totally unfair thing to ask Bert to do because he'd never done it before. But he's a great singer, and an actor, and was the best. He was the best business presenter for any customer briefing. He just got the great pipes, and he did it. He just did a killer job. So thanks to Bert.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Bert.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so a couple of questions here, if you're okay in me going there.
What's that?
So
Oh
there's
yeah.
one from Marek here, and he says, "This book is genius. My background is oil and gas as a geoscientist, and I've confronted the ways of being. Oh, I know what I'm doing. In other words, the way of being. How is the way of being different from state of mind?"
The way of being. I mean, I think it, I think the way of being is kind of where you're coming from, um, in the way I think of it, and I think we all we all uh, develop I'll say phony way of being. That's our professional persona, and you think that you have to be a certain level of demanding, or you think you have to lead a certain way, or the only way you're going to be accepted in the club is to be a certain way, and that becomes a way of being that's not authentic. It's not authentic. It's one that is like clothes we put on before we go into the office every day. And I feel like when you get in touch with the three principles, and you get touch and move in the direction of that we're trying to point to. When you move in the direction of that, you drop the phony way of being, and you get more in touch with your authentic way of being, which is a more human and a more. And it doesn't mean that it's soft and it doesn't demand results or doesn't look for results or whatever. But I think deep down, people's authentic selves are better than their way of being selves. And when you get in touch with your authentic self and come at life and come at your coworkers and your employees and whatever and your family, from that perspective, amazing things happen and you can't go back. I hope that answers his question.
It does to me. George, anything on your mind with that?
No,
Okay,
not a
cool.
thing.
Wendy, you put some really lovely comments in here that I enjoyed reading as well. And one of them that Wendy Williams says, who lives in New England, um, she says, "I loved the green sponge hand at the Celtics game. I'm a Bostonian, and that level of levity and fun with Dr. Bump was precious." It's funny because that's one of the scenes that I will never forget. That scene at down at court level at that game.
Oh yeah.
Really cool.
The,
And
the,
lots of
fu-
other
the, the
comments here
funny
from
thing is,
Christy.
in that scene is the only, just prior to them going to the basketball game, when he's in the bar, and in that scene is the only person who actually appears in the book playing themselves, which is a kid named Billy Del Negro, who's a friend of my brother's growing up, and his cousin is Vinny Del Negro, who I just kind of weaved in. He's an real NBA guy, but he's not in the book. But Billy is in the book. So um, he's the one person who's actually playing himself. He doesn't even know it yet.
Yet. Yeah, that might be a useful thing to now know, given the fact that you've just said that. Cool. Marek says, "Thank you." There's a bunch of questions here, and I'm not
Thank
sure how
you.
much time we're going to have to go through them. Um, there's some here that probably need more than just a few minutes of answering, so I'm gonna skip those if that's okay, and maybe we'll find a way that for you to answer them more fully.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm going through a lot of these looking for a really simple question, and there's a lot of things I'm catching up on here with a bunch of really good questions. Here's one then, because there's a few that I've just read, and I think there's a subtext behind them regarding the detractors that George that you said was there, and Don, that you shared an example of someone that publicly was very dismissive and potentially rude. How do you keep your bearings when that's happening?
Well, it's very simple. I don't take it personally, and that stabilizes me because I know there's going to be detractors, and I know that they can't they can't help themselves. And if I don't take it personally, it works for me.
Yeah, it's a great answer, and just human beings being what we are. It's so hard. And when you ask what is state of mind, is you know, state of mind in many respects is an impersonal way of walking through the world. You
Yeah,
know, and I in the early going, and even to this day, I guess, but in the early going for sure, when people would be, as I said, downright rude to George, it would just not affect him.
yeah.
And then that was a great lesson. It was a great lesson. I still try hard to remember it, but not taking things personally in the world it probably adds 25% more to your life if you
Oh,
can
yeah.
do it. If you can not take things personally, and people are going to be how they're going to be, and if you can roll with it, it's an amazing thing to cultivate.
Well, I remember one thing. I remember, George, at one point I asked you about that. How do I not take it personally when it sounds like they're personally, getting at me? And you said, well, it's still their thinking. It's
Yeah.
still not about you. So to me, it's not just, yeah, it's not just not taking it personally. It's to see that there's no such thing.
Mhm.
And that was the real beauty of it, to go that far
Yeah.
into what's behind any other human's behavior is all them in their relationship with what's going on in their own mind in that moment.
That's right.
And that was just genius to me. That has changed my life, Don, to your point.
George would say, okay, so that guy, he thinks I'm a quack, and he thinks I'm spewing a bunch of nonsense, and he really wants to get up and storm out of the room, and he thinks I'm an idiot. What does that have to do with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really good way to think about
Yeah, really is a good way of thinking about it.
it.
All right, there's a question here from our friend Don. No, to Don and to you. It's from Dusty. How do I get an author signed copy of the book? So I guess there's going to be a couple of requests for that.
Yeah.
And there's just a
Tell,
bunch of thanks here again from
tell
everyone
Dusty
that
there's a
we.
10-year backlog for those, but I'll see what I can do. Dusty was a huge help with the book, as you know,
He
Wyn,
was.
as you know. Terrific
Well,
guy.
yeah, really good. Okay. So any parting words as we finish up before we say goodbye to everyone today?
Well,
G.
I I I uh, I hope that people enjoy the book. That's all I have to say. I hope
Yeah,
everybody enjoys the book.
I second that, and I'm very grateful that people seem interested in the book, and that you guys took 90 minutes of your life today to listen to us chat about it. And we're so grateful to everybody, and the people that have helped this book in all kinds of different ways. And if we can make a dent in the world with it to some extent, it'll be well worth the time and effort. And so anyone you want to share it with, or anybody on this in this in this webinar or beyond that has any questions about the book or any things, feel free to contact us, and we just hope it does some good out there. And thank you for attending today.
There's a lot of thank yous and questions to you, Don, about when you're going to do a book signing in Boston. When's the movie coming out? Literally, someone has just said that and said it would make a really good movie. I mean, the other thing, what my faith in the book, and I remember I mentioned this to both of you, is I think this is the most important book about business and the people who work in it that's ever been written. And I stand by that. And I've written that. I wrote that on Amazon.co.uk, the British version of that, the day after the book came out because I'd read it a number of times, including the final manuscript. But I really do mean it. So if you're at all tempted in getting a copy, then by all means do. And I'm already giving a bunch out to people because I know what it's going to do for them. So I want to thank you for all your time and energy that you've put into this. It matters a lot that you've done this. So thank you.
Thanks, Wyn.
So as Don just said, get in touch. Pransky and Associates, Jen, get ready with a bunch of emails, and you and Terry will probably have to work a weekend to get through them from everyone's demands, but you can blame Don for that, I suppose. And the success of this. And Wendy just said, I'm serious about the book signing, and Jen's just put in the email address with any
Oh, nice.
comments, questions, and anything that you want to know.
Well, listen, I wanted to thank you, Wyn.
Yeah. Thank you, Wyn. Thanks for hosting, and thanks for all
Yeah,
your help.
all your goodwill.
Well, it's been my pleasure. You know how much I care about you two and this project in itself. So it's been an honor.
Thank you.
Hey, great to see you all. Have a great rest of your day and great end to your week.
Thanks, everybody. Take care of yourselves.